Welcome to BBC News, broadcasting to viewers in North America and around the globe. My name is insankhan. Our top stories. Tough words for some US leaders. Students from the school targeted in a mass shooting demand tighter gun controls.
All our government and president can do is send thoughts and prayers that it's time for victims to be the change that we need to see.
President Trump's national security advisor accuses the Syrian government of using chemical weapons and demands action from global leaders. Thousands turn out to show their respect in Zimbabwe as the body of the opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai returns home. Also in the program, can you see anything unusual about this Picasso? We'll uncover the mystery hiding behind the masterpiece. Hello, I'm insankhan and this is BBC World News. Thousands of people in Florida, including survivors of Wednesday's mass shooting, have taken part in a rally to demand tighter gun controls in the United States. The event took place outside the court building in the city of Fort Lauderdale, which is just a short distance from the school where a former student, Nicholas Cruz, killed 17 people. Laura Westbrook reports.
Outside the federal courthouse in Fort Lauderdale, this was the message to lawmakers. Among the protesters was Emma Gonzalez, who took cover on the floor of her school's auditorium as a gunman started shooting.
We call BS!
She had this to say to Donald Trump.
If the president wants to come up to me and tell me to my face that it was a terrible tragedy and how it should never have happened, and maintain telling us how nothing is going to be done about it, I'm going to happily ask him how much money he received from the National Rifle Association.
What she's referring to is the millions of dollars the NRA has given towards the Trump campaign. On a visit to the hospital where the victims of the attack are being treated, the president once again made no mention of guns or gun control. Instead, he says the problem is mental illness. Just a few kilometers south of where the protest is being held, a gun show is taking place. In the US, there are as many guns in circulation as there are people. The NRA is the most powerful lobbying organization in the United States. They've successfully resisted every move to tighten gun controls, and for their supporters, it is a fundamental freedom.
When somebody infringes the right for persons in this country to keep and bear arms, then it's an infringement upon our rights. It's a violation of our civil liberties. Now we have a bigger problem.
We will be spending our time at funerals.
But after yet another school shooting, anger among the younger generation is rising. In fact, students across the country are planning a mass walkout of schools in April, the anniversary of the Columbine High School massacre. They are demanding adults listen to them and tighten gun control. Laura Westbrook, BBC News.
Well, in the last hour, President Trump has sent out a tweet on the FBI and its investigation into the high school shooting. He suggested that the FBI missed the signals that the Florida gunman Nicholas Cruz was planning a massacre at his school because, he said, the agency is spending too much time investigating his ties to Russia. He tweeted that this was not acceptable and that the FBI needed to get back to basics. Now, President Trump's national security advisor has called on world leaders to hold the Syrian government to account for its continued use of chemical weapons. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, H.R. McMaster says it is clear that such weapons are still being deployed. Tensions between Moscow and Washington have also been evident at the conference. Our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette.
Well, it's not the first time that senior U.S. officials have accused President Assad's government and its main ally, Russia, of being behind the use of chemical weapons in Syria. And we also had recently a warning from the French President Emmanuel Macron said that there was evidence that they would strike in retaliation for any use of chemical weapons. So it's not the first time, but Emmanuel Macron, in his case, had said there was no proof. What we've heard today from the National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, is he said that judging by public records and by photographs, the evidence is clear. He didn't though make clear which public record and which photographs he was referring to. But we do know that time and again, every time this accusation is made, the Syrian government denies it, and they responded when there was the warning from Emmanuel Macron. The Deputy Foreign Minister Faisal Mekdad said that the Syrian government did not possess chemical weapons, and he described them as immoral and unacceptable.
And that's the BBC's Lise Doucette in Munich. Let's take a look at some of the order in which 4 soldiers were hurt. An Israeli military spokesman said 6 Hamas military targets were hit, including a tunnel. It's not known if there are any casualties at this stage. Around 100 neo-Nazis have held a torch-lit march through the Bulgarian capital, Sofia, to honor a nationalist leader who formed an alliance with the Nazis during the Second World War. The event, held for Lieutenant General Christo Lukov, went ahead despite condemnation from the mayor and also 2 US congressmen. The march has been held annually since 2003. 14 people, military helicopter carrying top officials surveying the damage from an earthquake crashed in a small town in the southern state of Oaxaca in Mexico. Shubha Krishnan has more.
It was supposed to be a military mission to assess damage and provide support after a shocking 7.2 magnitude quake. But it all went terribly wrong. The helicopter carrying Mexico's interior minister and the Oaxaca state governor crashed on top of 2 minibuses in a small village not far from the epicenter. 14 people were killed, including a 6-month-old baby. Remarkably, senior officials on board survived. The delegation had been touring Oaxaca, the epicenter of Friday's earthquake. While no deaths have been reported from the earthquake itself, it did nearly 1 million homes and businesses without power. Witnesses of the helicopter crash say it could have been the power cuts that played a factor. They say it circled several times, raising thick clouds of dust and further reducing visibility.
Todo el pueblo no tenía ni luz. The entire town was without light. It was dark. We were happy up there. We were going to sleep up there. We were all going to be up there, but look what they did. The governor was supposedly coming to help, but what was the help? The aid we received. This was the aid?
Mexican politicians have apologized for the accident, but that won't do much to ease the pain felt by relatives mourning the loss of their loved ones. Shubha Krishnan, BBC News.
The body of Zimbabwe's opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai has arrived back in the country following his death from cancer in South Africa earlier this week. He was 65. Hundreds of his supporters were at the airport in Harare to pay their respects. Our correspondent in Harare is Shingai Nyoka.
He arrived at the airport where hundreds of supporters were there to meet him. His body. Zimbabweans have been in a very somber mood. Remember that he has been in politics here in Zimbabwe for about 20 years. He's led the movement for democratic change for all of that time. And many people are wondering what will happen to the opposition now that he has passed away, given that in about 4 months' time the country will be heading for elections. Well, it's a major departure from what Zimbabweans are used to under President Robert Mugabe's ruling party as well as the ANC. But what we've heard over the last few days from Emmerson Mnangagwa, the president, he described him as the son of the soil, and they had said that they might even consider conferring another honor on him. General Chiwenga, who, the relationship between the military and the MDC has always been tenuous, and they also hailed him as a man who contributed to democracy and pushed for free and fair elections in this country. Across the board, what we've seen is something that Zimbabweans have never really seen, which is all the political parties coming together, putting their differences aside to celebrate the life of Morgan Tsvangirai.
The British Prime Minister has called for a new security treaty with the European Union after Brexit, warning that lives could be at risk without. Theresa May said the new arrangements over working together should be effective by next year. Our political correspondent Vicky Young reports from Munich.
In defence and security, the UK is a significant player, and the Prime Minister hopes that will get her a special deal. She arrived in Munich keen to lay out Britain's contribution, generous spending on defence and expertise it wants to share even after Brexit. Theresa May urged the EU to take a practical approach.
This cannot be a time when any of us allow competition between partners, rigid institutional restrictions, or deep-seated ideology to inhibit our cooperation and jeopardise the security of our citizens.
She's calling for a new security treaty so that the close partnership can continue. Failure to agree one would have damaging consequences, she said.
We must do whatever is most practical and pragmatic in ensuring our collective security. Those who threaten our security would like nothing more than to see us fractured.
Some listening to this were left bewildered.
The Brexit decision from the point of view of us inside the EU is extremely regrettable. Things would be so much easier if you stayed. So here comes the question.
Mrs May pointed out that Brexit was a democratic decision politicians should respect. One senior Brussels figure seemed to agree. The Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said the EU wasn't at war with the UK and didn't want to take revenge on the British people. He said the security bridge would be maintained, but you couldn't mix it up with other issues. Conservative MPs attending the conference here believe the speech is a good starting point for talks.
We've got to start getting into the detail of this. I think one thing we can do is improve our offer around defence and security, and I do think we need to have another look in the UK as to how we prioritise security.
So it's a pretty familiar message from Theresa May. The UK is leaving the European Union, but that doesn't mean that close cooperation needs to end. And it's a blunt message too, saying to Europe's leaders, don't let your ideology get in the way of the safety of our citizens.
The government hopes today's speech will show it's acting responsibly, not wanting to drag the important issue of security into fraught Brexit negotiations. Vicky Young, BBC News, Munich.
Stay with us on BBC News, still to come.
I was the best figure skater in the world at one point in time.
She was famously linked to an attack on a fellow skater. Now the story of Tonya Harding gets the Hollywood treatment. We speak to the film stars.